Story time. For my trip to Vietnam, before I even got there, I knew there were a couple of kinds of places that I wanted to photograph. And one of them was the incense making villages. I had seen these beautiful pictures, like colorful, naturally saturated images of Vietnamese people working in these villages, and all the incense spread out into layers to dry after being colored. And I had such a visceral reaction to what I saw on the internet that I knew I had to photograph it for myself. But one problem was that none of these places online where I found these pictures actually said where the images were taken, other than incense villages near Hanoi. So I had a pretty tall task of trying to figure out where these villages were. And Hanoi was actually one of the last destinations that I was going to visit in Vietnam. And before I got there, I was in Hue, and I had heard that there was an incense village like right outside Hue. And so on my last day there, despite the weather looking like it was not going to cooperate, I decided to get a bike, because of course that's what you do when you're in Southeast Asia, and try to go to this incense village. And we went into the countryside and we just drove, or rather I sat on the back of a motorbike for a good while, and it just kept getting more rural and more rural and more rural. And at one point I thought, for sure I'm getting kidnapped. And lo and behold, we got to this incense village, and the first thing that I saw was a big bus, like a coach for tourists, and my heart immediately sank. But much to my delight, there actually weren't any tourists around, and the village looked very pretty. It had bunches of incense sort of lined up on the stores along the side, and I had a pretty good walk. It did start raining at some point, but I was able to see some incense being made, mostly by hand. And I got some portraits of this lady who, in her sort of broken English and a little bit of Google Translate, told me that she had been selling there for something like 50 years. And it was all great, but I quickly realized that that place was not what I was looking for. And when I did ask one of the people there, they said, actually, what you're looking for is in fact near Hanoi. So I was back to square one, trying to figure out where near Hanoi these places were, because nobody could tell me, especially not in Hue. So once I arrived in Hanoi, one of the things that I started doing immediately was trying to figure out how to get to one of these incense villages. After a ton of research online, I figured out what the best of these villages was, and it has a name that I can't pronounce, and so I'm going to put it on the screen here for you to see. So I thought the hardest part is done. I know where to go. And there were some instructions online on how to get there by public transit, but it would have taken something like 2 hours each way. So I decided to spoil myself and hire a driver for the day with a car who would take me there, wait around for me, and then bring me back. And I booked this through the hotel. The hotel didn't really know exactly where I wanted to go, but they assured me that the driver did. And when the driver picked me up very early one morning, he said, yes, I know where to go. And spoiler alert, he didn't actually know where to go. So we drove and we got to this village that he thought was the village. And we looked around and we saw nothing. So after just driving around for a bit, he decided to finally ask. And asking, we actually made it to the right village. The first thing that I did was put my drone up in the air to do a little bit of reconnaissance, because I didn't actually know where in the village the incense making was, even though online it said it was the entire village. And immediately my heart sank again. What I saw was two like smallish, medium-sized patches of incense being arranged in a way that was very clear that this was a tourist attraction and not actually a working space, at least those two areas. And I saw a couple of people, not very many people, so at least weren't a lot of tourists there. And I thought, okay, well, I am here, so even though this doesn't look very promising, I am just going to go ahead and take some pictures. Both of these places that I saw from my drone charged for you to go in there and take pictures of yourself. And I was not interested in doing that, so I skipped the first place altogether. But I did go into the second place, and I didn't want any pictures of myself, but I did want to take pictures of the arranged incense. So I paid, I think it may have been like $5, something like that. And I just went ahead and took some pictures. On the pictures I had seen online, a lot of the images were taken from above, and being a drone person, I assumed that they were drone shots, but actually they have scaffolding and stairs, very perilous, set up so that people who want to get their pictures done, they can have other people climb up high and take these pictures. So I climbed, and mind you, I am mostly a dress-wearing person, so I was climbing up and down wearing like very loose dresses, and I'm pretty sure everyone down below got a show, but what are you gonna do? You gotta do what you gotta do for the shot. It was mostly kind of bland stuff, but there were these two women off to the side actually working, or they seemed to be actually working. They were taking big bunches of incense from carts and then laying them out to dry on tarps. And this was within the same compound that I was in, but not in the same area where they had the incense set out in this, like the shape of the Vietnamese flag and star shape, and in ways that tourists could go in it and get selfies or get pictures of themselves in. But what I was actually interested in was in the making of incense and the people who make the incense. So when I saw those ladies, I immediately shifted my focus to them, and the color of the incense sticks they were putting out there was this bright pink that, depending on which side you shot, actually looked deep red. And it was absolutely stunning, and I knew those were the pictures I wanted. Like, that is what I went there looking for, and I found it. And I spent quite a bit of time photographing them. They saw me, they smiled, they knew that they were being photographed, and they, hammed it up a little bit. They were actually pretty surprised that I was interested in them and what they were doing, and not in the other touristy selfie kind of place. And we did have a little chat again, basically through like Google Translate and hand signals, and they showed me a little bit of what was happening. And eventually one of them did want me to take some pictures of her in the other section, and she went in there and she really played out for the camera. And I am glad that I took the time to take those shots, because they are some of my favorite pictures from this trip, period, not just that day. And so she hammed it up. I shot her in a few locations from a few vantage points, and it was wonderful, but I still wanted more. And I figured if they're taking these incense bundles from a cart and they look fresh because they're still a little bit drippy, they have to be coming from somewhere. So I walked deeper into the village, and a few doors down from the space where the incense was drying out, there was a place where two men were dipping incense sticks in color, in dye, and those were the sticks that the ladies were putting out to dry. And again, I just stood there totally mesmerized, because all of this craziness trying to figure out how to get here actually had paid off. And these sticks just looked so amazing, and the people working them were so friendly. And again, they must be used to the camera, because they saw me and like they just hammed it up. They eventually invited me inside the workshop. So I went in, and I didn't want to be in their way, so I didn't stay too long, but I did get a few shots from behind where they're actually putting the bundle of incense sticks into the dye. One person does that. Then he passes the bundle to somebody else who then puts it into the cart that eventually goes to the ladies. And at that point, I was already into it. I was already super excited. So I just kept walking deeper into the village. And you know, sometimes things work out in such a way that make you wonder whether this was all planned, and you know, maybe it was. But the way that I encountered the artisans in this village was in the opposite way of how the incense is made. So first were the women drying it, then it was the men dyeing the sticks, and then I found a woman who was putting the sticks into bundles, and she was doing this so quickly with so much dexterity that it's obvious that she has been doing this for all her life. And my little photographer and I guess people-loving person was just beaming because I couldn't believe that after all that work, I was actually there and I was actually seeing this, and it was incredible. So I kept on walking, and the next artisan I encountered was a woman cutting the bamboo into the sticks that were being bundled, carried, dyed, and dried. And it was just incredible. And by the time that I got to her, I knew that I had done it. And every single person that I encountered was just fantastic and friendly. And one person actually spoke English, and they told me it wasn't actually high season for making incense. The new year had just passed, and that is when their highest production time is. And so I had come at a little bit of a slow time, which is why the whole village wasn't involved in incense making. But nevertheless, I did get what I went there for, and it was such a dream come true, and it was such an incredible experience, both in experiencing the actual process, but also from the photographic perspective, because I had already resigned myself to, you know, this is a tourist trap, this is just not happening. And then it turned out that actually it wasn't that way. And the moral of the story here is perseverance. And their first appearances are rarely the true spirit of a place. And despite how hard something in photography might be, you just have to see it through. If it's something that you want to do deep in your heart, you just gotta do it. And I am so glad that I did. And if I hadn't, I'm sure that I would still be kicking myself in the butt. And this is how I photographed a dream destination, a dream process. And yeah, it was so fantastic. And I hope that you have liked this little story. I know it was a little different from my last video, but sometimes retrospective views on our experiences are also a great way to relive them. And thank you so much for watching. Go out and shoot with a camera. Bye.